Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin. I'm a health coach with EWS. And today we're going to be talking all about the power of positive thinking. Okay, so as always, or if you haven't been to one of our wellness webinars before, you can type into the chat if there's any issues with the audio, with hearing me, with seeing the presentation. Please just let me know. I will be turning off my video soon to share the presentation with all of you. And yeah, also feel free to type in any comments or questions you have as you think of them throughout the presentation, and I will address those at the end. Okay, so yeah, we're maybe going to get started. It looks like we have people here, so that's great. Hope you guys are enjoying this beautiful day. It's the perfect day to talk about positive thinking, I think. It's always easier to be positive when the weather's nice outside. Okay, so just a quick disclaimer. I am a health coach, but I am not a licensed psychologist or mental health therapist. So, I mean, of course, this presentation is for information purposes only. But as we discuss some of these topics, you might find there's some questions you have, or issues that are specific to something you've gone through. And it's okay to ask me questions at the end of this presentation. I will definitely do my best to address them, but some deeper stuff might come up for you, and that might be better suited to a mental health therapist or a psychologist. So definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, we will get started. There was also a handout that was listed on our Stay Safe, Stay Healthy website with the webinar registration. So it might be helpful to have that with you. If you don't have it right now, that's fine. You can always print it off after the presentation. And of course, we'll be posting the replay link so you can all watch this. All right, so I'm going to turn off my video and we're going to go ahead and get started with this. Okay, so the power of positive thinking. This is a breakdown of what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so we all know what positive thinking is, right? But today we want to explore the science, how we can implement it, and how it can benefit our lives. So it's important to note that positive thinking doesn't mean our head is in the sand and we ignore life's problems, okay? Rather, we approach them in a productive, solution-oriented way, and we look at the situation with a positive lens. Okay, so it's that analogy of the glass being half full rather than half empty. So to do this, to start with positive thinking, we want to focus on some different topics. And one of them we'll be discussing today is neuroplasticity. So this is how we train a positive brain and wire positive thought patterns. Okay, and positive thinking begins with you, and it's something that has to be practiced to become habitual. So for many of us, negative thinking has become the norm and the automatic. And this has become habit based on our environments, our social and genetic conditioning. So we have to remember that positive thinking can be conditioned this exact same way. And then there's others that we have the ability to influence by creating positive relationships. So we're going to talk a little bit about this as well, and how we can build our cognitive flexibility, gratitude, and forgiveness by learning to let go of the past. And lastly, we want to focus on the fact that we can create a positive environment by being responsible for our own energy in a room. So first we want to examine, is positive thinking even rooted in science, or is it just wishful thinking? In other words, is it woo-woo, right? So there's actually a field of research called psychoneuroimmunology. I can hardly say that. It's probably why there's an acronym there, PNI. So psychoneuroimmunology is the study of the interaction between psychological processes in the brain, so essentially our thoughts, and the nervous and immune systems in the human body. In other words, the study of the brain-body connection. Okay, so what we think or believe can actually affect the biochemical makeup of our bodies, and it can affect our immune system. So the research has shown that negative thoughts and fears can change a healthy alkaline blood system, which is when we're healthy, our blood tends to be alkaline. But when negative thoughts come in, research and science has shown that our blood system can actually become acidic. And this causes all sorts of negative effects, including the suppression of the immune system, and it makes us more vulnerable to disease, viruses, and illnesses. All right, there's many mechanisms that account for this. We're not going to get into all of that today, but one of those mechanisms is the hormone cortisol, which most of us have heard of. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and in high amounts, cortisol can upset the balance of the immune system. So it serves a purpose. It strengthens our fight or flight response, which is our sympathetic nervous system. So we're ready to react to emergencies and to danger. But at the same time, it can weaken and damage other areas of the brain and suppress our immune system. So this is a cascade effect. It's easy to see when we're in a stressful situation how our heart rate increases and our blood pressure goes up, okay? But even just thinking about a stressful situation can do this to us, okay? And scientists have proven this through what's called mirror neurons, which is when they see an area of the brain light up in the exact same way as it would if it was performing the action. So you might have someone watching a sport and the exact same areas of the brain light up as if they were playing the sport. All right, so of course we know our heart rate speeds up, our blood pressure increases, but this also affects other areas of our body, including digestion. So we think about the sympathetic nervous system, again, that fight or flight mechanism, working in direct opposition to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also called our rest and digest function. When we're in fight or flight, we can't be in rest and digest. So there's less blood flow being directed to our digestive organs and more to our extremities, like our arms and our legs, to prepare for an emergency. So short term, this is fine. This serves a purpose. But long term, when our digestion is impacted, it can affect so many other parts of our body. So we're not absorbing our food, we're not getting the nutrients we need, it's affecting our immunity and ultimately our entire body. All right, and if you still don't quite see the connection as to how our thoughts can influence our bodies, a really good example to try is the lemon example. Maybe you've heard of this. You can even try it quickly right now. All you do is just close your eyes and imagine you have a nice juicy lemon sitting in front of you. And you're going to cut into that lemon, you're going to cut a wedge out, you're going to smell the lemon. You're going to do this very visually and slowly. And then you're going to take that wedge of lemon and stick it in your mouth. And just really put yourself there. Picture all the sensations and the tastes and the tanginess of it, and put yourself in that situation and what you would feel like, what your body would experience eating that lemon. Okay, and when I do this, like I start salivating, parts of my taste buds that react to sour things start to fire up, and I just notice it's like I'm eating a lemon. So it is true that by thinking about something, we change our physiology. So there's really a lot of benefit to positive thinking that science has also been able to show. So for one, positive thinking is connected to physical health outcomes, like decreasing the length of hospital stays and decreasing our risk of heart disease and mortality, especially in those who already have a predisposition towards these diseases. There's also mental and emotional health outcomes. As I'm sure you could have guessed, positive thinking leads to lower levels of depressed mood, anxiety, and general distress when we're faced with life's difficulties. And then there's also the shift in perspective. So positive thinkers tend to be problem solvers. They accept the realities of life rather than avoid them. And they can look for and see the bigger picture. They're also less likely to smoke or drink, and more likely to engage in healthy behaviors like exercise, sleeping well, and eating healthy. So now I want to talk about how our focus can impact us when it comes to positive thinking. Okay, so we all have a wide range of concerns in our daily lives. Our health, our children, our families, problems at work, and of course, more recently, the global crisis of COVID-19, right? So some of these things we have no real control over, such as the past, other people's behavior, and a global pandemic, right? Can't really do a whole lot about that. So these items fall into what's called our circle of concern. I'm just going to see if I can highlight that here for you guys. Okay, so these fall into what's called our circle of concern. All right, and then there's the things we can do something about, such as our own behavior, our attitudes, our thoughts, and these fall into what's called the circle of influence. Okay, so these two focus wheels here were a concept that's created by Stephen Covey, and he describes a proactive focus, so that's the circle right here, as being responsible for our own lives. So he says our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions. Proactive people focus on issues within their circle of influence, those things that you can control. They work on things they can do something about, and they're driven by values and feelings. They increase their circle of influence and decrease their circle of concern out here. Okay, and on the flip side, reactive people focus their efforts in the circle of concern and tend to not have as big of a focus on their circle of influence. Okay, so their focus results in blaming, accusing attitudes, reactive language, and increased feelings of victimization. The negative energy generated by this type of focus, combined with neglect in the areas that they could do something about, causes the circle of influence to shrink and the circle of concern to grow. So hopefully you guys can see the difference there. All right, so it's important to note we all have a circle of concern. Okay, we're never going to get rid of that completely, but it's a matter of figuring out how much space we give it. So I just want you to ask yourself, what are you focusing your time and energy on? Are you proactively focused or are you reactively focused? So it can be helpful to listen to our own thoughts and beliefs to know whether or not we're in a circle of influence or a circle of concern. So the circle of concern is filled with a lot of have statements. If only I could just have more money, more time, that other job, or if only I had that body, that house, etc. You also might tend to notice need statements. I need things to change in order to be happy. On the other hand, the circle of influence is often filled with be statements. I can be more resilient, more deliberate, more focused, more grateful, etc. So it shifts the responsibility and the power back to you. So if you find that your circle of focus tends to be reactive and you're focusing a lot on concerns, there's a good chance that you're operating from a fear-based mindset. So fear usually underlies negative thoughts and feelings like anger, resentment, guilt, and even sadness. And fear arises when we see a change in our lives, whether positive or negative. So a perfect example is the current pandemic. We've experienced a lot of change in a short period of time, and that can be pretty scary and uncertain. So this brings up fear for most of us. But it's really important to recognize that fear is just a reaction. It's not a real thing, even if it feels very real. Okay, and it typically results from our belief systems. So I've seen this acronym, and maybe you have as well, but I like it. It really illustrates a good point. FEAR stands for false evidence appearing real. So that's the acronym, false evidence appearing real. And I like to remind myself of that, every time I feel like I'm stuck in a fear-based mentality. Okay, so fear definitely serves a purpose. It tries to keep us safe, but long-term, it can also keep us stuck. Yes, of course, this pandemic is real, and having concern surrounding it is a very normal and natural response. But you need to ask yourself, to what extent am I playing out worst-case scenarios and allowing these negative thoughts to hijack my mind? Where else could I be sending my energy and thinking? So another influence behind our thinking is the past and what we choose to hold on to from the past. Notice how I said choose. So a grievance is a strong negative emotion connected to an event that we experienced in the past, but we keep it alive by compulsively thinking about it, by retelling the story in our heads or out loud to what someone did or said to you. A grievance will not only contaminate your mind, but many other areas, many other areas of your life. So essentially, when you're holding on to a grievance, you're living in the past and not in the present, and you're unable to fully live your life. We need to learn how to let go. Okay, so we must forgive ourselves and others, along with allowing others to forgive us for any wrongdoing. And I often find that forgiving ourselves can be the hardest part. Okay, so this isn't to say that if we've experienced a trauma or something really big in our lives that we're just supposed to let it go. Okay, this is where enlisting the help of a mental health professional could be really, really helpful. Okay, but the point is that letting go and learning to start letting go can allow us to think more positively. So my challenge to you is to maybe write down 1 or 2 grievances that you currently hold, and to start practice letting go of these negative emotions that stem from past experiences. Okay, so how do you start letting them go? Well, it can be helpful to ask yourself some questions like, what would my life be like if I let this go? How would it be better? What would it feel like? What would I have more time and space for? And a really powerful visualization for me is picturing these negative emotions as balloons that you're just releasing into the sky. There's also some really powerful meditations that can be helpful for this as well. Okay, but it's really, really important to note that this takes practice. Okay, it's not a one-time thing. All right, and I just want to emphasize here that forgiveness is not saying that what happened to you is okay or that you would want it to happen again. It's accepting that it happened, observing how holding on to this is no longer serving you, and letting it go. Okay, so depending on what it is, this can take a lot of time. So I would suggest starting with something small, like maybe an insensitive comment a friend or family member made, and working your way up from there. Okay, don't make it the big thing that you want to practice letting go of. Start small and work your way up. Okay, so now we're going to talk all about neuroplasticity and training our brain. So making positive thinking a habit is very much a function of neuroplasticity. So essentially, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to create new connections and neurons are simply cells of the brain. So this quote at the side here from Dr. Andrew Weil talks about how our emotional state can be practiced in much the same way that we learn how to play an instrument, drive a car, or speak a new language. We can make new pathways in the brain and strengthen them so they become the ones we use more regularly. How does positive thinking affect neuroplasticity? Well, every thought that you have releases some type of chemical. So when positive thoughts are generated, such as when you're feeling happy or optimistic, cortisol decreases and the brain begins to produce those feel-good neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So this creates a feeling of well-being. And when we're in this state of well-being, we tend to feel happy, calmer, less anxious, more focused, and emotionally stable. Okay, so essentially this positive feedback loop reinforces itself. Dopamine is also a neurotransmitter that helps control the brain's reward and pleasure center. Okay, so the mind affects the mind in many positive ways. Positive emotions also widen our span of attention. So when we begin to practice positive thinking, we tend to pay more attention to others, especially when we're in that positive state. And research has also shown, interestingly, that there are new growth and connections made in the prefrontal cortex of the brain when positive thoughts are generated and reinforced. So our prefrontal cortex is an area that controls much of our decision-making, our self-control, judgment, and learning. So, I mean, you can think about how difficult it is to make a decision when you're under extreme amounts of stress, right? It's very hard versus when you're in a calm, happy place. And the science of positive thinking is further proven by Donald Hebb. So he was a Canadian psychologist, and he examined how neurons fire together and end up forming connections with one another. So this was coined as cells that fire together, wire together. The more we activate these neuronal pathways, the stronger they become. So this also includes habits and thinking patterns. It's that use it or lose it mentality. The more we practice positive thinking, the stronger these pathways become and the easier it is to use them. When we can fire up these pathways in any situation, we begin changing our brains. So a really good analogy for this is to think of a mountain and to think of all the crevices and grooves that run down the mountain. The deeper grooves collect more water and more momentum, of course, from the rain. So in the same way, the pathways that we activate more often are easier to activate in the future. So maybe at this point you're listening and thinking, well, this all sounds great, but why does it seem like it's so much easier to think negatively than positively? Okay, so I want you to try this test with me for just a second. Close your eyes. No, really, close your eyes. And imagine that you just won $500 on a scratch ticket. So I just want you to put yourself there and feel the excitement and pleasure of that experience. Feel how happy you are and excited and all those positive emotions. Okay, now keeping your eyes closed, picture that you just lost $500 at a slot machine. So I really want you to experience that letdown and the distress of the situation, the disappointment. All right, now open your eyes. Which one did you feel more intensely and where did you feel it? Okay, so my guess is for the majority of you, you felt losing the $500 a lot more strongly than you felt winning the $500. And if you did, you're not alone. Research has uncovered that the majority of us feel the losses much more intensely than the wins. And we feel it more intensely in other parts of our body, like in our stomach. For example, we get that heavy feeling, our heart might race, we might feel our throats tighten. So this is very, very normal. So yes, it is true. Negative information has a greater impact on the brain than positive information. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. So it's very true that redirecting our thoughts and energy to the positive initially takes more work, but by no means is it impossible. Okay, and this isn't our fault, actually. It's based on millions of years of evolution. All right, evolution is a slow process. So we still have the brains of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, but now we're living in the 21st century. So this means that we're still programmed the way our ancestors were programmed thousands of years ago. Okay, so people way, way back when in the hunter-gatherer societies, people who walked around happy-go-lucky, unaware of their surroundings, and not paying attention to possible predators lurking in the bushes were the ones who got eaten. Okay, the person who was on alert for danger around every corner, hypervigilant, noticing the negative, in other words, was the one who survived. Okay, so this type of programming meant our survival. But in modern day life, we can see how this no longer serves us. So we need to adapt our brains to a world where we no longer have to worry about predators lurking around every corner. Okay, and the intensity we experience with negative feelings is a result of that fight or flight response I keep talking about. Okay, it creates a chain of events in your brain and body. So you experience that adrenaline rush, a rise in blood pressure, and an increase in heart rate, which signals your brain to release more of those endorphins or neurotransmitters we talked about, like cortisol. And then this feeling becomes overpowering. So again, remember, this meant our survival at one point in our evolution. So that these negative feelings had to be more intense than the positive feelings. So the question is, if the negative is so easily imprinted on the brain, how can we ensure that our positive thoughts have a greater impact on us? Well, we can use that great concept of neuroplasticity to rewire our brains. So number one, build your brain. You can build your brain by learning something new. MRIs reveal that learning to play a new musical instrument, for example, performing a complex dance, or mastering a new language actually increases the size of your brain. So this learning is called whole brain thinking because it utilizes both the right and left hemispheres of your brain. And this learning actually makes it easier for the brain to build other connections, like the ones we want to build for positive thinking. So a great example of this that I've heard a psychologist reference is you can even do something as simple as brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand and repeating, let's say, positive affirmations or thoughts that you don't typically tell yourself. Okay, your subconscious is more likely to be paying attention and take these affirmations in as truth. And we're going to get more to the subconscious in a moment. Number 2, focus. You want to develop and practice a daily positivity focus. So this could mean that at the end of your day, you reflect on a small positive that happened. It just takes 30 seconds, but you want to let it soak in, form a mental snapshot of it using all of your senses, and strengthen those neural pathways. It also helps to write it down. The point is to train your brain to notice, appreciate, and spend a little more time with positive things you experience throughout your day, even if they're just small things. Okay, so you'll become more conscious of positive moments and you'll have an easier time recollecting positive experiences as time goes on. Number 3, reduce stress. The body cannot build new brain pathways when there's constant stress. Stress can actually damage the brain by pruning back the number of branches and synaptic connections made and increase the rate of cell death. So you can practice things like meditation, breath work, yoga, all of those great stress reduction techniques we love to talk about so much. Number 4, laughter. Laughter can put us into the positive mindset to begin brain training exercises. So studies show that redefining negative situations in more positive or humorous terms counters the adverse psychological effects that would otherwise be experienced. So often if I just feel like I'm in a negative funk, I might start watching a funny show or movie that I know will make me laugh just to get me in that state of mind. Number 5, brain food. The brain uses up to 20% of the nutrients we consume. So you really want to make sure you consume a healthy diet, including green leafy vegetables, your good fats like avocados, fish, nuts and seeds, and stay hydrated. All right, what the brain gets is what the brain will be able to put out. All right, so we really want to build the brain up. And number 6, actively rethink the situation to take it from a stumbling block to an achievable challenge in your mindset. So when faced with a negative thought, you want to look at the 3 R's, which are rename, reframe, and redirect. So I'll give you a quick example here. Let's say you had a work meeting and you feel like you messed it up or you didn't deliver the pitch you wanted to deliver. So you might start by renaming that negative thought. So for example, you might be thinking, I messed up in that meeting, I'm a failure. All right, so the first step is rename it. Notice that most of the time we go for worst case scenarios. What's another way you can look at this situation? That's where we're going to reframe. Number 2, how can I think of this differently? All right, well, it wasn't my best meeting, but I'm learning and I can do better next time. And then number 3, redirect. You might want to direct your energy somewhere else for a moment, like distracting yourself by either exercising, doing some deep breathing, which actually can change your brain chemistry, watching something funny, etc. Okay, so far we've talked about training our brains and a lot of the science behind this, right? So how can we keep this positive momentum going? Well, a great place to start is with yourself and your self-talk. All right, so this is where we get a little bit into our subconscious mind. So your subconscious mind is responsible for approximately 95% of your thinking and behavior. So it definitely makes an impact. If you tell yourself that you're weak, dumb, ugly, the brain accepts this as truth. So it's really easy to start changing this, even when we don't quite believe it yet. The first step is to catch yourself. So if everyone was able to hear the kinds of things we say to ourselves, we'd probably all be in psychiatric wards, right? If we talk to our friends the way we talk to ourselves, many of us wouldn't have any friends. Self-talk is one of those first steps to reprogramming your mind. So see if you can stop the negative loopholes and replace the thoughts. For example, I'm not stupid, I'm learning and eager to try. The subconscious mind does not know the difference between the statement, I am weak, and the statement, I am strong, okay? It just accepts what we say as truth. So really to begin to be mindful of this talk, because most of us don't even pay attention to what we say to ourselves on a daily basis. After starting with ourselves, we can take this positive talk and begin extending it to others. Okay, so we all know that building people up is more effective than tearing them down. Nothing feels better than genuine praise from others. You think about a time that you've received praise from someone else. It's a really good feeling. We all need recognition and encouragement. And it also feels good to make someone else feel good. So one really good tool you can try right now, or after this webinar, is to express your appreciation to someone today. You can either write them an email, call them, text them, Zoom them, whatever it is, but just tell them why you appreciate them and recognize something they did. Another task that I'd like you to try as we come to the end of our webinar here is to look at your handout, and there's a page that says self-talk and positive affirmation task. So you'll see 2 columns. And again, if you don't have this handout, don't worry about it. You can always refer to it later. But you'll see that there's negative self-talk items in column A. So I'd like you to look at the items in column B and see if you can start switching out some of these statements in column A for the ones in column B. Okay, and we've probably all said some of these things to ourselves. And an example I can think of right now that's not on this list, but I've heard it a lot lately, is some variation of, ugh, life sucks right now. I wish things could just go back to normal. All right, so we could try reframing this statement to something like, yeah, this is a challenging and unprecedented time, but how can I see this as an opportunity? So maybe you can start thinking, wow, I finally have some time to do things around the house that I didn't have time to do before when life was so busy. Or I always said I wanted to read more, now's the time to dive into that novel series. Or didn't I say before I never had enough time? And if time is something that you don't have more of right now, look at another area, like the opportunity to work and learn from home, enjoying your living space more, getting out for more walks. Okay, so there's always something that we can recognize as a positive in this situation, and we can reframe that negative self-talk. Another way that we can extend positive thinking to others is to practice cognitive flexibility. So this is just a fancy way of saying your ability to see a situation from multiple points of view and find possible solutions. Okay, so cognitive flexibility affects the quality of your relationships. If you can see others' perspectives, you can better understand them and be empathetic to their experiences. You end up contributing positively to others, and you're more likely to receive the same treatment in return. So it's just another benefit of positive thinking. And then there's gratitude, okay? So you guys knew this was coming, and for good reason. So the research shows us that gratitude has the ability to change our brain and help us to become more resilient in adverse events. So I would say most of us likely define COVID-19 as an adverse event, which means it's time to start using this very simple yet powerful tool if you aren't already. And the science shows that gratitude stimulates parts of the brain, such as the hypothalamus, which is responsible for regulating stress, among many other things, and the ventral tegmental area, and that controls our reward circuitry and brings us feelings of pleasure. Gratitude also increases our mental strength. Okay, so not only does it help us reduce stress, but it can play a major role in helping us overcome trauma. And previous research has shown this in Vietnam War vets and people that were closely affected by 9/11, that when they were able to use gratitude, they're able to overcome their traumas quicker than those who didn't. So this gratitude can help you make positivity a regular part of your day. So suddenly you're helping to wire your brain to recognize the positive in everyday situations. You start keeping your eyes open and you catch yourself and others doing things right instead of always seeking out and criticizing what you think is wrong. So it's like we're changing the lens in which we see the world. And then as a side effect or a side benefit, we also change how we speak to others. All right, so another in-class task or task you can try after the webinar is to list 3 things you're grateful for today. Now, if I coach you or if I've coached you before, you know that I might have told you to do this already. I think this is a lifelong habit everybody should implement because it is so profound and so life-changing, and it can really help you develop resilience in this situation right now. All right, another task that I already mentioned is thinking about someone who you consider a positive influence and sending them that positivity back by sending them a thank you note, an email, a phone call, and just letting them know how you appreciate them. But the gratitude, it's a big one. And I would also encourage you to try this before bed and even in the mornings if you find you're really struggling. So it can really just help reframe not only, I believe, your sleep, but also your outlook on life when you start that in the morning. So as you begin cultivating and practicing the tools we've discussed here, it's important to remember that anything new takes practice, and some days and moments will be easier than others. I know we can all relate to this. So it's helpful to look at these moments as peaks and valleys. Peaks are the moments when it's easy to appreciate what you have, right? Things are just going well, everything's good. Valleys are the moments when you long for what is missing. Okay, so it's important to remember you can change a valley into a peak by changing your thinking. The path out of the valley opens up when you choose to see things differently. The goal is to find the silver lining in every situation we're faced with. All right, and this is going to take practice, but it can begin by asking yourself the right questions. Like, what can I be thankful for right now? Some days it might just be clean air or the sun is shining, and that's enough. Just appreciate it, practice it. We're flexing our muscle of positivity, and it needs to be trained to get stronger. So you might begin using some of these tools, and you might start feeling really good about them, but then you encounter a situation at work or a family member, and you have a very negative experience either in that situation or in that conversation. And suddenly you feel pulled back to your negative tendencies. How do you deal with negativity from yourself or others when you're trying to focus and build a positive mindset? Okay, so we can go back to some of these tools. Practice cognitive flexibility. Rather than focusing on the negativity, reflect on where that person might be coming from. You know, so you might just think, wow, this person just has a habit of thinking negatively and they might be having a really bad day. Secondly, you want to know the truth. So every thought has an emotion, and this emotion likely doesn't have much to do with you. So if someone's feeling angry or being rude, probably has nothing to do with you, okay? Construction through deconstruction. You need to recognize this. So people that often have low self-esteem will build themselves up by tearing others down. All right, this is where you can use your cognitive flexibility to understand where they're coming from, but to recognize that it has very little to do with you. And then spinning the negative to a positive. So the brain will almost always choose the negative first, like we discussed, but we can really pause here and try to change that. You know, so for example, rather than thinking this person doesn't like me, I must suck, you know, we could change that to, wow, this person must be having a bad day. It probably has nothing to do with me. And then lastly, create a positive environment. So you don't want to contribute to the negativity. You want to either change the conversation or just go somewhere else. So this leads me to talking about your energy and the responsibility you have for your energy in a room. So we've all been in those situations where we can sense negative energy from somebody, or even if we don't know them, you just sense that something's off, right? But the important point here is we don't have to give in to that. Okay, so leaving a positive energy impression can serve you in so many ways. You can connect better with others, but you also will feel a much greater sense of fulfillment and support in your life. So the challenge here is to actively choose not to take on others' negativity. Like, I get it, sometimes it can be really hard, right? So that's where you have to know the situations where it might just be easier to remove yourself, but ultimately to remember that you're responsible for your own energy. Once you get yourself to a positive place, one of the things you can do is share it. So some of these things we already talked about, we'll just go through them again, especially specific to work, is to, for one, share more of yourself. And you can share more of yourself, for example, in work meetings. When you share your knowledge and expertise in a respectful way, you're sharing a part of your personality and you make yourself more approachable. You can also speak positively about the people you work with and avoid gossip. Okay, this builds trust with others, and no one wants to be known as the office gossip. You can also have a team attitude and support the work of others. Or you can ask others to become involved in your projects or activities. And here we go again, writing thank you notes. So when someone helps you or extends themselves to you, show your appreciation through a thank you note on their desk or through email. Words of affirmation can make others feel closer to you and recognized for their contributions. And it does feel good to recognize somebody else. Initiate conversations by asking questions about the person you're speaking to. This gives you the chance to learn and listen about somebody else and to share yourself as well. And it establishes a two-way interaction that helps to create a bond. So by building positive relationships at work and influencing a more positive environment, you make your workplace a much more productive and happy place to be. So in closing, I want you to remember that you have the power. So every moment we have the power to change our mindset based on how we think and act. You wire your brain to follow certain patterns, okay? This whole concept of neuroplasticity that we've discussed. By creating more opportunity for the formation of positive pathways, you increase your health and well-being. Neuroplasticity is our opportunity to rewire a negative mindset to a positive one. If we start to work on our own positive mindset, we influence others and we can even transform our environments. All right, so it does take practice. You know, there's so many different quotations, but I can think of a variation of one, something like, if you want to change the world, start with yourself. And I would argue the first step of that change is changing how you see the world. And that's all through positive thinking. All right, you guys, so that brings us to the end of our webinar here. Thank you so much for being here with me. Hopefully you can walk away with some action items from today and from the handout that you can implement. We listed all of the references and resources on this handout as well. So if you have more questions or want more information, you can definitely check that out and look there for more information. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. You can also type them into the chat box. I'm just going to see what we have here right now. Okay, will a video copy of this webinar be emailed out? We will be posting a replay of this, Gary, in our Stay Safe, Stay Healthy website. So you should be getting a newsletter from us every week that links to that website. And so we've been posting all of our webinars in this spot. Will your PowerPoint be made available for us to have? So yes, Tracy, that's all in that Stay Safe, Stay Healthy website that we have. If you have any questions about it, just email your health coach or you should have Heather's email or Beth's, but definitely we're housing all these webinars on our main page, Stay Safe, Stay Healthy. Oh, you're welcome, Michelle. I'm glad you found it informative. You're welcome, Tracy. You're welcome. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. I really enjoyed talking about this today because, again, we all need more reminders about how to be positive right now. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and get some sunshine. It's beautiful out there.